So what I'd like to do now is just show you an example of a technique that has emerged in therapy. It's not a hugely mind-blowing technique. All it is that if the relationship between the client is what it's all about, and if the experiences between the client and the therapist is a mutual process towards a beneficial change, then I used to look at my book and I think, why am I writing everything down here like a secret? And in fact, I would write my things down on the book, and periodically through the session, as I'm sure many of you do, you would give a reflection, utilizing your notes to help you. So I wondered what it would be like if the client saw what I was writing in the book, if the client participated in the things that I thought were noticeable. And so out came a whiteboard, and one day it started to emerge, and I found that the clients were so curious and interested in what was going on the board, and suddenly all these problems that were deep within them were actually out there, and they could look at them in a verbal sort of way. It's certainly something that we know we use in sand play and various other therapies, but it is done in doing it this way. It gives a verbal approach. I've got another one later, which is another verbal approach. But just have a look at this therapy. Now, this is just a little introduction into the idea of the open book. Now, in the curiosity approach, the whole point of the curiosity approach, as we've been mentioning, is that it needs two. It's a creative activity, and that we're shifting in the curiosity approach. We're shifting from doing the client sitting over there and us sitting over here, actually to enhancing the relationship. So it's a mutually expansive experience. Now, in the open book, I really came across it because I actually do use a book. I use a literal book for each of my clients so that it feels like, and it's an open book. I say to them, and I've been saying for years, this is an open book, just whenever you want to look in. Then it dawned on me, why don't I do what I do in the book on the board? And things started to generate from there. So here's just an example. I'll use one of the samples. Now, what I use is just a whiteboard, and I stick it up on my lap like this, and it's really, here I am. I'll just get that reflection of the window out. So here's an open book. Now, when I start to use this, certainly you don't use this all the time, not necessarily with all clients either, because it can be a bit confronting for some. But all the time we're trying to show people what they're doing so they can see it, particularly if they've got negative beliefs or things that they don't want to accept. And as we talked about, arguing the untrue truth, where they don't want to accept that their truth is an untrue truth. They want to, they want to believe that they're doing well. So when I find a client, when I find them looking as though they're starting to go too far inward, because you've got to be very careful of going too far inward and re-traumatizing. The idea is to try and keep things outward, try and keep things in a place where we can all observe and we can create with together. And this is what art therapy is, this is what sand play therapy is, and all that. So here's an actual example of some work that I was doing. Working with a client, she was having a lot of trouble with her father and the relationship back there when she was 9 or 10, now in her 30s, and having difficulty relating to people and having a whole bunch of things. And so she was going on, and she was just starting to get a little bit, not so much sorry for herself, but, just sort of getting, and starting to almost re-traumatize herself. So I got the board up, and I said, okay, I see what you're talking about. There you are. You're talking about justify myself. Yeah, that seems to be a thing you're saying all the time. Justify myself. So who do you justify yourself to? To all these people. Who are all these people that you justify yourself to? Now, this was a process that went right through our sessions, because she would say everybody and all people, and she would go like this. And when I actually pressed her, it would generally come down to one or two people, and the one that constantly came in was the dad. So I would say, so who are some of these people that you're justifying yourself to? And she'd go, oh, she said Dad, but she also said a couple of other people. There was a sister and a brother, I won't put their names here, and a stepsister. And I said, so we talked a bit more, and as I can see in my note, what she said was, they're only sometimes. So as I kept talking to her, we talked about various things of this justifying myself, and why do you have to justify yourself? And I don't write everything that she says down. They're just those things that highlight to me. These are sort of my reflections along with hers. But the one that jumped out was she said, because otherwise they win. So I put it up on the board, and I actually said to her, so what, that means you lose. Now can you see what's happening here? She's seeing this all going out in front of her. So I said, what are some of the things that Dad would say? And amongst things, she came up and I wrote it down. You are nothing. And very often, the things that I choose to write down are the ones that are the most emotionally charged. People sort of, as you know, clients build up a little bit as they sort of tease around the edges of something, but then they say the whammy. Well, you are nothing was the thing that she said, and she reiterated, Dad does this, and he wins all the time. She reiterated. So I wrote it down on the board again. And we talked about this a little bit more. And what she did was, instead of looking inside herself and feeling bad about herself, she looked at this. And she looked at, yeah. And one of the things she came out with, which I wrote down, is she just said, everyone is better than me. Now this system is also very good for someone like me who's a very vibrant client, because it slows me down, which is very good, but it creates a pace. So I said, wow, we talked about it. And what I notice in my notes here, and this is quite a while ago, so I actually put a dotted line around that. There must have been a comment. And then we actually drew a thing around there, back to the Dad, because I was constantly saying to her, okay, everyone is better than you. So who's everyone? And again we went back to that, and so as we did so often, she would come back and say, no, it's only Dad makes me feel like everyone is better than me. Because I would go through, how about the people at work? And I went through it. How about the people in the shop? How about me? Am I better than you? And I can't remember what she said. I think she sort of said, well, yeah, you're a counsellor and you've got degrees and you got that. I said, no, I've done things. I'm older than you. I said, but am I better than you? See, you said everyone's better than you. You know, like more worth being around. So see how I'm able to do this. Instead of there just being this conversational reflection, we have a visual thing made out of words. Now, this is kind of like verbal metaphor therapy, or verbal sandplay therapy, verbal symbolic images therapy. Now, I think that's pretty good. That just gives you an idea. Now, at some stage, we'll have got off this. We'll have sort of got out. We're starting to work on things, and we might. I just put the board aside. I said, that's fantastic. Then I'm back to focusing on my client in the particular work that she wants to do or he wants to do. And this goes into the book as I've done. And that becomes my reference. And just reiterating, the whole point of this is that we are seeking, as we know from research, that relationships are what make a good therapy session, that the relationship between the therapist and the client is the best part of therapy. The curiosity-oriented approach lifts that whole idea in and says, let's create the relationship first and have therapies be what you utilize along the way. You can utilize a single focused type of a therapy that you work on personally, or you can be like I do, where I used maybe a dozen. I mean, just whatever therapy I keep learning, and they drop in. With this particular client, we ended up going into art therapy. Now, I'm not a highly qualified art therapist, but I don't need to be, because we didn't do highly qualified art therapy. What we did was, as a pair, we used art to create a beneficial change and a growth and an understanding. We created a curious avenue for us to invent and design and make things better, which is really what curiosity-oriented therapy approach is looking for, to create a beneficial improvement, a beneficial change. So that's just a quick look into what I call the open book. You can use this, you can use something on the wall, you can use some butcher's paper, an art pad, whatever you like. But give the client some participation in your experience too. I think that makes them interested and curious, and that makes them expansive. That brings them into broaden and build. That brings their mind into the ventral vagus, socially engaged process. If they don't want to talk to you, they can talk to the board. Okay, hope that was interesting. Thank you.